My name is Gladys Gburrell. December the 1st, 1915. My mother had just two. My sister and I. No, she had three because she had one death in the family, little Eileen. She used to talk about her a lot. I think she died about a month after she was born.
Oh.
So she didn't live. And then we went on to 1918. My father, my own father, passed away in 1918 in the flu epidemic in Oswego, New York. That's where we lived, in Oswego, New York. And after he passed away, Mom went to live with a friend of hers that had a little girl, Eileen. And we lived together, and it was only about 2 blocks from the where the Army
base was.
So they used to go to dances. There was nothing else to do but to go to dances. Like they didn't have roller skating and all the things that they have now in movies and all. So they used to go dancing all the time, and that's where my mother met my stepfather. And so they went together for a while, and then finally, when I was 6 years old when we moved from Oswego to Syracuse, New York, and that was a big city.
Uh-huh.
And Mom started us in school there, and we lived there. But before we moved to Syracuse, I can remember we lived in this house with Anna, Roy, and we had to go to an outhouse if we had to go to the bathroom. We didn't have an inside bathroom, and we had electricity in the kitchen, and there was a chain that hung down about 3 feet with a bulb on it. That was our light in the kitchen, and in the bedrooms too. No running water in the house. We had to go and pump. It was out in the backyard. We had to go and pump the water. But then when we moved to Syracuse, then we had an inside toilet, and we had running water then. Mom had when she lived, well, before she lived with Anna too, she had a big stove. I guess it was a coal stove. And she had a big tub, a big oval tub on the stove that she kept all the time with water so that she'd have hot water. She'd have a fire in the stove, and have the fire going all the time. And that's what we do. Doris and I always had to take a bath together. There wasn't enough water for each of us to have alone, So that's what we did. And when we got to Syracuse, why, things were a lot easier for us because we had more room, of course. Then my stepfather he was a very good man. He was very good to Doris and I, and to my mother too. And we had a car, and we could get out and get around a bit. In Oswego, I went to kindergarten there, I guess it was, and we had to go down a flight of stairs to the bathroom. And it wasn't a good bathroom, like they had a pot or something for us to go there, but not a really toilet or anything. We didn't have, because we didn't upstairs, we didn't have inside things, but that's what they had, a pot downstairs where we would go downstairs, the little kids to go. Regular grade school, and Doris and I both I can't remember how, we had to walk a long way to go to school, and we used to play along the way. There was a big lake, and weeping willow trees all around the lake, and instead of going to school, we'd go and get those weeping willows, and swing on those and play. And half the time we'd go home, and my mother would make my father take us back to school because we'd be late and we wouldn't want to go to school, but she'd make us go back anyway. There were like about 20 or 30, I think. It was a big class. eventually we got a telephone. And when we first got a telephone, there were only 3 numbers that you had to dial. And like if you picked up the phone and somebody was, I would say, sorry, you know, I need the phone or something like that. And they'd hang up and let us have the phone. Oh no, what we had in Syracuse was a little corner store on like different blocks. No big supermarkets or anything like that. There was just a little store, and like it would be a meat market alone or groceries alone. A man came to the door. We had little boxes on the back of the house that you'd open. The milkman would come and open the door, put the milk in there, and close the door. He delivered the milk early in the morning, and when it got cold, we had a lot of snow up there. When it was cold, we were snowed in one winter, about 3 feet of snow we had against our door that we couldn't get the door open. The vegetable cart came along, and all the women, he'd move a little bit along the road, you know, and all the kids, all the women, the kids would go out to see the horse, and sometimes the man would give them a carrot to feed the horse, and the women would buy their vegetables and whatever they wanted. That's all he had was just vegetables. And Mom used to go out every day, and then the iceman would come around, and we only had a small ice box that would only hold 25 pounds, I guess it is, of ice at the time. We had a furnace down the cellar, and my dad used to have to go down and shake that every once in a while and get the fire to go. And they had radiators either in the wall or in the floor. A lot of them were in the floor. And Mom and I can remember me and Mom too, standing on the radiators because we were cold. Well, after we were in Syracuse a while, my dad wanted to find some kind of work, so he had a gas station built. He wanted to sell gas, so he bought a big corner lot, and the gas station faced South Avenue. That was the main drag in Syracuse, and then on the side street was Bissell Street, and that's where our house faced on the side street. See, they had, there was a laundromat that we could, not a laundromat, a laundry that we sent our clothes to. We had our wash done because we didn't have washing machines then, but then when washing machines came in, they were, you know, you had to do it by hand, like the wringer and like that, and turn the wringer over to the water, put the clothes through the wringer.
Wow.
And I can remember when the first refrigerator came in. It was a big white square refrigerator, and legs about that high off the floor, and everybody all thought they were wonderful, you know. And there was a big coil on top that made the refrigerator go, and we thought that was wonderful. And I don't know how much room there was because it wasn't. Yeah, we didn't get our TV until the kids were about 10 or 12 years old. We had radios. There was a man that lived in the store next to my dad's gas station that had a radio shop, and so we were well supplied with radios. We had one like in our bedroom, and Mom had one in her bedroom. And she had a Victrola, a wind-up Victrola to play records. Every morning she'd wake Doris and I up playing records. In the hospital, and Ronley was the first time that I'd ever been in the hospital. And I was 24 years old then, and I'd never been in the hospital for anything, so I was pretty healthy. And I know when I came up here, this was years later, but when I came up here, and I know I was 88 because the nurses were so surprised because They asked me when I was in the hospital the last time, and I said when my son was born, however old he was that time when I was 88. And they couldn't get over it that I was 88 and that I'd never been in the hospital, only when I had my 2 children. They put us under. I can remember her slapping my face and saying, go to sleep, go to sleep. She would slap my 2 weeks we had to stay flat in bed for 2 weeks. They thought that the organs didn't go in place till 11 days. And we had to lay flat on our back in bed until the 11th day. Then we could get up or sit up in bed, and then eventually get up and sit in a chair. And then maybe after that walk down the hall. They had a nursery, and it was just a little ways down the hall from me. And I could, when I sit up in bed, I could look down the hall and see. I could see the nursery, but I couldn't see the babies. And it was a lot different than the way they had it in the hospitals than now. Doctors always came to the house, Yeah, you have to call them. Tell them that you got a sick kid and you had to have them come to the house. And you come the next morning or whenever you call them. Gosh, I don't remember that. Because at our house, everybody, it was a place that we didn't lock our doors or anything. Everybody was friendly, and they all had kids, and all the kids played together, and that was our fun. We never had like games, like go to Walmart and buy games. We played leapfrog and things like that outside with all the kids, and we just didn't have to. I never had a bike. Doris never had a bike when we were little. Girls didn't have them anyway, and boys didn't either. Usually you'd see a man go to work on a bike, because everybody didn't have a car then. Yeah, there was no fighting or anything going on like or shooting like there is now. We didn't even have policemen.
No policemen?
Not that I remember. I know in Oswego we did it anyway, and I know of something I wanted to tell you. I'm going way past my story. A lot fresher and do more, and all the kids, everybody played together, and even kids like 12 and 14 would go to dances. Doris and I used to go to dances when we were 14 anyway, and because there was nothing else to do. No, not at all. No, and Mom went, and Father, they used to go for a ride every night. And one night I woke up, I was sleeping when they wanted to go for a ride, so they went and left me. And I woke up alone, and I was scared to death because it was dark. But nothing happened. Mom said, you know that you were safe here. That's why we left you. And she kind of scolded me because I went across the road to the neighbor's house because I was scared. I worked in a 10-cent store on weekends when I was going to school, just weekends and Christmas holidays. And I was in the candy department, so I was in a good place because I liked the candy. And when my dad had the gas station, he paid the men that worked for him each $25 a week. That was their pay. Well, groceries butter was like $0.25 a pound, and bread was 15 cents a loaf. Everything was very reasonable. Older women did or like I can remember going to Ed's mother's house and she made her own bread and like that, but my mom didn't. She cooked meals but never baked much. I did for a little while, and they sent me, there was a desk downstairs that they had a Hoover representative there to speak to people when they came in. And the floor walker asked me one day to sit down there and take a letter for him. He said that I had to write down what he said, and so I wrote it down. He wanted the people to buy a Hoover and whatever all he told me. So then when he read what I wrote down, or what he told me to write down, he said, "Can you go upstairs and type?" And I went up, and I didn't type a very good rate, but anyway, I worked up there in the office for about a month or so, and then came back down on the floor. And I just run errands is what my job was. Like when the girls would want something, like if they needed bags, I had to go and get bags and bring them to them, or if they needed something, I had to go and get it for them. I always say that if it was now, I would be arrested, because Ronnie and Donnie stayed alone when I worked. That's what people did. They left their kids. They didn't. That's how safe it was, you know. They didn't have anybody to take care of their kids. There were no nursery or anything like that. And so they just left their kids if they had to go to work. And that's what I did with Ronnie and Donnie. When she was, I think she was 22, and she got up one morning to go to work, and she couldn't walk, and she said, my mother, she said, "Mom, I can't walk." And Mom called the doctor, and he called it polio radicalitis. He didn't know what to call it because it was like polio, but he said it wasn't polio, but very similar. And she was taken to the hospital, and he said that the poison went through her body instead of coming out, instead of her breaking out with the measles. The poison went through her body, and that's what poisoned her. And she was paralyzed from the waist down. She was in the hospital for 3 months, in bed all that time. They had what they called a bed tent, and it was made of wood, and it was up and over and down like that. And it was up about a foot that they put in under the covers to keep the quilts and things, the sheets up off of her legs and feet, because she couldn't stand to have anything touch her legs.
Oh, wow.
She was very sick. And then when she came home after the 3 months, it was a while before she could be up. Mom and I can remember we had a long driveway in our house, and Mom would get her under one arm and I'd get her under the arm, and we'd just drag her along the driveway back and forth, because at first she just, with her feet, pick them up and drop them down like that. And then eventually, the more that we took her back and forth, she finally got so that she could raise her feet a little bit. And then I guess about maybe a year or more, I can't remember now how long that it took before she could walk. Not completely, because she'd be all right for a while, and then she'd, be sick again. They could come back on her, and then she'd be all right again for a while. Oh yeah, when the war was going on, we had no coffee. Lots of times we'd go without coffee for a week or more before we could buy it at the store. The store would be sold out. And what else did we have? Oh, bacon and sugar we couldn't get. You'd go to the store, and the stores would be the shelves bare where the sugar and the coffee was supposed to be, because people would stand like at the door to get in to see if they could get the sugar or the coffee. And it was rationed out. We couldn't, look, I thought there was something there. We couldn't get things that we wanted, there were just things that we could have and things that we couldn't have, like eggs. You could get eggs pretty well because there were enough chickens, but there were so many things that we couldn't get that I think people are just not careful, they just take advantage of having things and don't care how much the things they throw away. I remember my grandmother, yes, and my uncle, but I don't remember. I guess my grandfather must have been there. Mom worked for a while after my own father died, and then when she worked, why, we had to go and live with my own father's mother and uncle and brother, I guess he was. And I can remember I didn't like her very well because Doris and I would go out to play, and we had kids that we would play with. And I guess I was a little snip because my grandmother would tell me to do something, and I thought that she wouldn't see me, and I'd stick my tongue out at her, and she'd go out and she'd grab my arm and she'd pull me in the kitchen. She'd say, "You march into the kitchen." And she'd take me into the kitchen and she'd stick her tongue out, she'd say. And she used to make her own lye soap, and she'd soap my tongue with lye soap, and oh, that was terrible, but it didn't stop me. When I had Ronley and Donnie, both, I figured that was my two good accomplishments. I think that's all I ever did good in the world. Ronley was born premature. She was only 4 pounds.
4 pounds.
When she was born, I fell down a flight of stairs. I got up in the morning, and we had puppies out in the garage, and I was loaded down. I had dog food and a bowl of water and all kinds of stuff in my arm, and we lived upstairs, and I wasn't hanging on to the railing or anything, and I fell down the whole flight of stairs, and it just happened that the doctor that I was going to and that my mother-in-law had, they lived downstairs. We rented an apartment from them upstairs, and she had an appointment that morning, so she said to me when she wanted to know if I was hurt, and I said, well, no broken bones or anything. She said, well, she had the doctor look at me when he came to see her, so he looked at me and he said, he just looked at me, and he said, well, if I didn't have any broken bones, why, there was not much he could do, but he said that if I didn't feel well, if I was in any pain, why, then to call him. And then that was about 8 o'clock in the morning that I fell, and then around, I think it was 7:30 that I started having pains, and Ron rushed me to the hospital because he called the doctor first, and he said, get her to the hospital. Because they had told him. No, she was only 4.5 pounds 4 pounds when she was born, but she gained up to 5 pounds before we had to stay in the hospital for 2 weeks when kids were born. My dad wanted to come to Florida, and my mother didn't want to come because that's when I was separated from their father, and he didn't want me to come to Florida. He said I couldn't. He wasn't going to let me come to Florida with the kids. And Mom told my father, she said she wasn't coming to Florida without me and the kids. So anyway, my father told me one day, he said when he used to come to see the kids, and then finally, after a while, it got so he was coming to see me instead of the kid because he wanted to get me back. He kept asking me to go back, and I didn't want to go back with him because I thought it'd be the same thing over again. And so my dad called. He said, you tell Ron when he comes that I'll give him $1,000 to buy a lot. That's how cheap a lot would be. That's what he paid for our lot on 40th Street was $1,000. And he said he'd give him the $1,000 to buy a lot. Then finally, when he asked me to go, I said, only if you take me to Florida. So then he decided that was a good deal. My dad told him that the things were booming in Miami, that there was a lot of building going on. It was thriving down there. So then he said that he would take me. So that's how I got to Florida. We moved up to Fort Lauderdale, but it was a while before we got up there because they wanted to sell their house down on Miami Avenue, and he wanted to buy a nice house up there, and finally they had one built, and one Ronley saw it, where they lived on, what was it, 22nd Street. That was funny. I always say that's what makes me believe in fate, because I had sold my house down in Miami, and I was just that very weekend going to move up and live with Ronley for 2 weeks, because I had transferred from the luncheonette down in Miami up to Fort Lauderdale, and I was going to work in customer service up there. And so my lady friend that I had, Ann and Clayton, you know, we used to ride the bus together all the time. And on the bus, she used to call out things, like if she wasn't sitting with me on the bus, she'd call out to me. One time she said, "Gladys, how's your love life?" And I was so embarrassed for her to call that, because there were other people on the bus, you know. So anyway, this time she was sitting with me, and she said, "What was I doing Saturday night?" And I said, "I'm moving up to my daughter's house." And I told her that I had changed jobs. I'm going to move up there. And so she said, "Oh dear," she said, "could you come down to my house?" She said, "I've got a man that I want you to meet." She said that she thought he was a very nice man, and that she thought that I would like him, and that he would like me. So that's how I met him. That I drove then from Marley's down to Ann's that night, and we went to the Luau for dinner over on 79th Street Causeway. Well, I don't think I was a very good mother, because I didn't know enough to teach him. My mother never taught Doris or I anything. Like when I was like 11 or 12, she never taught me like the
women things.
Women thing, yeah. And Doris didn't either. We just had to learn for ourselves. But women didn't talk about anything like that then. Like to talk about sex was a no-no. And then in those days, women just didn't do it. I don't remember that, because the kids are always fooling around. And we used to sit on the porch steps. We had the biggest porch and big steps like you have at your house now. We had big steps, I can remember, and all the kids would collect there, and we'd sit on the steps, and we used to like to burp. That's crazy, but that was our fun. We'd see who could burp the loudest, and or we'd get a glass of water and we'd spit the water out, you know, and see how far we could spray with a glass of water. I don't know if they kissed me or not, but I can remember them all being just so familiar with each other, you know, not being shy or anything, not doing anything bad that they shouldn't do, but they just, I don't remember if they kissed me or not. He had a Model T Ford.
Oh, yeah?
And I didn't write that in there. I forgot about he used to have to go out every time he'd come to get my mother, and they'd take us kids out for a ride because it was so new to have a car. He'd have to get down on one knee and crank it up to get it started. My own father passed away in 1918 in the flu epidemic, and then I can't remember anything more about that, just only that he passed away. And then later there was, we lived in Oswego, and it was right on Lake Ontario, and right there is where the, what do they call it, when he was in the First World War, and he came back from the war, and my mother, we lived with a friend of my mother's, and they would leave us kids alone at night even, because it was so, you know, safe. Nobody was around ever, no crime or anything. And they would go to dances, and that's where my mother met my stepfather, right, the one that turned out to be my stepfather. I was about three, when he passed away, and about, I think just before I was about 6 when Mom married this man that turned out to be my that you knew.
Right.
John Ryan, Yeah, that was my own father's mother.
Okay.
She passed away, and they didn't have medicine or anything like they do now. The doctor used to come to the house all the time, and when my grandmother got so sick, the doctor told my uncle, my father's brother, to go to the drugstore and get a ball of cotton. It came in a big round ball, and it had blue paper on it. You know those big bales of hay you see out in the country sometimes?
Yeah.
It reminded me of that, only smaller.
Oh, wow.
And he put camphor on her chest and unrolled that roll of cotton, took the paper off, and put a big square of cotton on her chest to keep her warm because she had such a cold. She passed away. And when she did, then they had there were no funeral parlors then. Funeral director would come to the house, and I don't know if he'd take her on, take care of her, do what he had to do. And then the casket was in the parlor of the house where the people lived. They didn't go to a funeral parlor in those days. 3 days and 3 nights, or 3 nights and I guess 2 days, whatever it was. But everybody was crying and everything. And I've said this before. I don't know if that's right to say, but when my grandmother passed away, she was nice, but she was strict. And I used to get mad at her because she would, tell me to stop sticking my tongue out. And so when everybody was crying, I thought I should cry, but I didn't feel like crying. I couldn't squeeze a tear. I used to spit on my finger and put spit. I did.
That's awesome.
I used to put spit on my finger and put it in the corner of my eyes to make believe I was crying. But all the neighbors came, and they, of course, didn't have wreaths like they do now. They put a big black bow on the front door. So long, and I think there were like maybe 10 on each side. There were 2 blocks of our main street, Bridge Street it was, and he had a long post, and these posts were high, so he had to have this pole, and he'd reach up. There was a little latch that he'd unhook and open the door, and then put a light in there, a flame in there. Don said it was, I didn't know how they did it. Don said it was like they do in church when they light the candles in church with a rod. And they wrote a song about it, The Lamplighter. The Old Lamplighter was the name of the song.
Now we got to find that.
He made the night a little brighter. Wherever he would go, the old lamplighter of long, long ago.
Cars were just coming in. They were getting real popular, and my dad decided that was the coming thing, so he had a man build us a house, and he, I guess, leased a gas station. I don't know how he got it, but he sold gasoline.
What was his name?
His name was James Diet. She wasn't really bad because she would, every once in a while, she'd say to me, or not to me, but to my sister and I, let's play tonight. Before we'd go to bed, she'd have us play a game, but it was always hide and seek. And she wore long dresses and a long white apron around her waist, and that was way down to the floor. And my place was under her apron, and Doris would get under the dining room table. And of course, my uncle would say, "Where are they?" And go on like that. And he'd say, "I hope they didn't go out. It's dark." And Grandma would say, "No, they're not out." But we'd play like that. No, I didn't, but I did when Merle, her husband, used to go hunting a lot. Yeah, and he had guns, so she wanted to go one time, and I used to go and stay with her a lot because we got real friendly. And one time I went with her, and we both tried to shoot the gun, and it came back and knocked my shoulder back, and I didn't want to ever. It was black and blue. I never wanted to try it again. I can't think of anything. Can't think of anything
Well,
I really want to do.
That's good.
Oh, let's see. Girl, but that was when I was about in 7th or 8th grade. Helen Murray. She was in between my sister's age and mine. She was a year older than me and a year or so younger than Doris. And we used to go to her house and stay overnight, and then she'd come to our house and stay overnight, and we'd sleep 3 in a bed. Oh,
Uh-oh, yes! These are good stories.
not anything very bad, but we'd go where Mom would tell us not to sometimes, you know. We'd go down, we'd sneak in the barracks of the, and try to see what was going on there. No, we never got caught, so it's not very interesting. No, all I wanted to do was get married. That's what all girls, they didn't ever must go to college or anything like that. They just went to school as far as they could and then wanted to get through school and get married, have kids. Well, I think it's better for the kids to have the mother stay home. Certainly better than how my kids were brought up. So many women are career women now. But at that time, why, mother stayed home. Well, before I got married, but when women stayed home. But when I did get married, why, then I had to leave the kids alone. No, I don't. I think that it's 50-50. We would always go to Atlantic City. Well, no, that was when I got out of school. We kids, all the neighborhood kids, we had our house was on a long street, and it curved around, and all the kids around the street would come and play. All together, we all got along good, and everybody would play like leapfrog and hide and seek, you know, just games like that. That's all there was to do. Oh, when we'd go, Mom always wanted to go to Atlantic City, and I hated it because I wanted to go swimming, and she and Doris wanted to get dressed up and go down the boardwalk. So I never got to go swimming, but we went there every summer. You know, like in Japan, those carriages that they have, they had those on the boardwalk, and it was $1 a ride, and we'd always get one of those carts, I don't know what you call them, and ride down the boardwalk. I guess my best memories were when we lived in Syracuse. When we first went to Syracuse, and my dad had a house and the gas station built for us, and we had a big front porch, and they had a lot of steps, and they were long steps. And all the neighborhood kids, I guess there must have been about 20 kids or more that lived on that long block, and they'd all come sit on our steps. And I liked that because we talk, and like I said, we'd burp. That was one of the things we did, see who could burp the loudest and crazy things like that. He wanted to go because he could save money over there, and he got the job over there. He worked, of course, for the Herald for 42 years, and he knew a man that was he was one of the writers for the Herald, and he used to go to Cuba a lot. And that's when it was getting kind of bad to go to Cuba. But he could get by because he was a writer, and I don't know what that had to do with it, but he would take Ed with him because Ed liked to play golf. And he wanted to go to the Bahamas and to Cuba and like that. And we never got to go to Cuba, but we did get to stay for about, I think we stayed in Bahamas for 5 years. And he told me that if I didn't want to leave the kids, Ronley's kids were babies then, and I wanted to stay with you kids and see you. I can remember one time when we came over, and I can't think of words. What is it? You had to go through customs, and there was a building where you'd go through the customs building, and Mom used to bring the kids down, and they were little kids like that. And one time when we came in, you'd come in one door, and then you'd go through customs and go out the other door. And they were standing outside the door, and they were, Grandma, Grandma.
Was like,
Oh, yeah, it was real different because the policemen, they wore like the English, you know, the big hats and different things like that. And they didn't carry guns. Everything was pretty safe over there. Mom and Doris came over, and Mom got mad at one. She was a little bit. She was feisty, and she was at at one of the slot machines, and she went to get some change or went to do something, I guess to get change, and the guy came along and took that one slot machine that she was using, and she came back and she said, "That was my machine," and they had a little bit of an argument. We used to have blackouts all the time, and if you were on your way home, if you worked, and if you were on your way home, and you could make it in 15 minutes to your home when the siren rang, then you could go home. But otherwise, if it was more than 15 minutes home, well, you had to stay and go to a shelter. Everything was black out. People used to have, a lot of people had black curtains to keep the lights out, not to let the lights show through when we had a blackout. And they would last, maybe a half hour or so. It was scary. The kids used to cry all the time whenever we had one, because we lived about 2 blocks from this big factory, Cross Heinz, Heinz ketchup. Cross Heinz, that was made there, and there was a big siren on the top of the building, and that would always scare the kids. I can remember when on D-Day, when we were in Syracuse, and we went down, my mother-in-law, her father's mother, knew somebody that was in the ROTC. I don't know why that was the color uniforms that they wore were the same as the Army men. And she had a lady make a coat for Don and a little hat with a visor on it. And he had that on, and we went downtown. Everybody was applauding and so happy because the war was supposed to be over. And the soldiers were coming around. There was a base kind of close to Syracuse, and they'd salute Don because he had that little outfit on that looked like a soldier. I used to be always changing the furniture around. And one time I changed the furniture around when Ron came home. We were having a blackout, and he was able to get home, and he went to sit in that chair where it had, and then it wasn't there anymore. He bawled me out. Said he wished I'd leave the damn furniture where it belonged. Yeah, we always had, but Mom liked little dogs, and we always had little dogs. But then when I got married, Ron had told me I wanted a dog when we got married, and I wanted a little dog, and he'd always had a big dog, so he wanted a big dog. So he told me, it was like almost my birthday, and he said, if I would let him buy a big dog for me, that's what he wanted. He said that he'd get one that was a puppy, and it would be small, and then I'd be in love with it by the time it got big. So that's how we happened to get the Chow. But it wasn't a puppy when we got it. My dad was selling Hoover cleaners at the time, and he went to this lady's house to sell a cleaner, and she had this dog, and she kicked the dog down cellar, and my dad said, oh, he said, don't do that to that dog. He said, that's a nice dog. And she said, I hate that dog. I'm going to take him to the pound tomorrow to get, put to sleep. And my dad said, oh, don't do that. He said, my daughter wants a dog. And he said, wait till I call her and see if she would want it. And I told him, yes, I would take it. And when I first when he brought the dog to me, I put my hand out, and she cowered down, and I felt so bad, that I kept saying, come to me, come to me. And then I loved that dog, and the kids loved that dog. She was the best dog. When we had to go to the bathroom, we'd raise our hand, and we couldn't go down alone. The teacher would have to take, whoever had to go, if there were 4 or 5 or however many, we'd have to go downstairs together, and it was a dirt floor, and it was just a big room, and there was a division. It was divided into, and the girls would go to one side and the boys to the other side, and then there was something like a wooden stool there, it looked like, but there was a hole in the middle of it, and you'd have to sit on that to go. Yeah, we were thrown in one time for 3 days. We lived upstairs, and the snow was up about halfway up our door, downstairs, the door that we had opened to go upstairs, and it was 3 days before we could get out. And that's why my father wanted to get out of Syracuse. He hated the cold weather. So he was saying that he wanted to get to Syracuse, or to Miami, and Mom said, I will never come to Miami unless Gladys and the kids are here. So that was why that was when my husband, Ron, we were separated, and we'd been separated for, I guess, maybe 6 months, or I don't remember how long. And he was asking me to come back or to let him come back. And he told me that he was in with the wrong crowd, and I figured, well, he might do the same thing there. And he said, no, if he got away from there, he would be different. And I wanted to get to Miami with my mother and father, and he wouldn't let me. He said I'd never take the kids out of Syracuse alone, if he didn't go with us. So my dad called me and told me the next time he came to see me to tell him to call him. So Ron called him, and he said that he wanted him to come to Miami, that Miami was really, they were building, and he could do electrical work because he went to college for that. And he owed us money because my dad was always giving us money. He never gave us any money or anything. And so when my dad talked to him, he said that he would give him $1,000 to buy a lot with if we would come to Miami. So I was thrilled at that. I thought, if I can get to Miami, I don't care if he comes back or not, but that's what we did. My dad gave him $1,000, and we got the lot on 40th Street, where we lived till the kids grew up. He drove it. My dad got a big truck for him, bought him a truck to put all of our furniture in. And he drove the truck down in my dog Pudgy. And the kids and I came down with Mom and Father and Doris. And he stayed overnight, and he said he had to go back the next day, so he went back the next day. And I didn't see him for 6 months. So he said he had to go back and finish up a couple of jobs. So that's what he did. He went back and stayed for 6 months. Didn't send any money, didn't hear from him or anything. He just showed up on the porch one night. And so then we went back together. My dad, he is such a good man to be a stepfather. He bought a little house out in, where was it? Miami Springs, I guess it was. Anyway, he bought a little house and brought it in and put it on a lot for us, got a lot and put it on a lot for us, and that was on 54th Avenue, remember, when we lived there. And we stayed there for a while. And then finally, things weren't going good. I guess after about a year, things weren't going good again. So he started running around and he left, and then finally I had to go to work and take care of the kids. And then my dad, the man that built his house, they had a nice house on 47th Terrace. And he got a hold of Wayne, his name was, I don't remember his last name, but he built the house for us. And my dad never charged me anything for the house. He just had the house built and we moved in. I'm proud of my girl and my boy. Well, just that I love my kids and didn't want to leave them. You know, that I want to be with them to bring them up and to make sure that they were safe.